Hi, friends. It's been a bit of a weird one this month, hasn't it? Well, originally, what I was intending to do for this was going to be another long-form chat with me and Fox about characters from this series, but the problem is that she already knows almost all of them, to some extent, at least the important core ones. Because of the nature of how time is working right now, where March took 10 years and April is apparently 2 days long, I haven't had a lot of time to get to work on this video. So this time, instead of getting a long, detailed, scripted kind of thing, or maybe a 3-hour-long video of me and Fox chatting about character design, instead we're going to do something a little more easy, and by that I mean you and I are now going to quietly walk through the Phoenix Wright wiki while I point out to you the major and most prominent characters, or the characters who have kind of long-reaching impact, or just stuff I want to talk about them, so that the next time that you are browsing that particular tag on your particular pornography website of choice, you at least can put the characters who are office ladies in some kind of meaningful context. First of all, a couple of ground rules. I'm only going to go for characters from the first 3 games here, which are the ones that once upon a time in 2004 were Game Boy Advance games that were then ported in 2013, I want to say, to the Nintendo DS. This means that we're not going to cover about 50 characters. We're going to cover a much smaller list. Second, I'm mostly going to be limiting myself to the characters who appear multiple times. I'm not planning on doing like an in-depth trivia list. I'm just going to kind of give you a kind of crash course on each character as we go through. There are some one-shot wonders who are going to show up because I either think that they did a really good story with them that was definitely worth holding on to, and or they're characters who had some subsequent impact, so later games matter because of things that character did. One other detail about what I'm doing here is that I'm going to largely try and avoid spoilers, but that's not necessarily going to be very doable. I'm going to try and keep things sort of contained, so you might learn about the setup of some things, but not how they end. The important thing is that, generally speaking, this is the kind of story where villains are defeated and heroes win. So, like, you probably weren't going into this expecting the evil prosecutor with a demonic laugh to necessarily wind up being a good guy who gets it over on you in the end. Part of what's the appeal of these games is that they have a vision of justice where good people win and bad people lose. That's very heartening and can be very enjoyable in this time. First up, we have Phoenix Wright. This guy is on all the box packaging. You've probably seen him before. He's done cameos in other games. Broadly speaking, Phoenix is... It feels almost a joke to say that Phoenix Wright is main character-y. He's a lawyer, defense lawyer in a, I guess I'd say, semi-parody of the Japanese legal system. The system in question is notoriously prosecutor-inclined. It immensely favors fast rulings. Court cases have to be over in 3 days. No one needs to submit evidence to the defense department, to the defense attorney. They could just spring it on them out of nowhere. The entire system is stacked the hell against Phoenix from the get-go. And despite this, Phoenix is also seemingly a ding-dong who doesn't like doing prep and occasionally falls asleep when he's trying to do the very difficult work of being a lawyer. Phoenix isn't a bad guy. He's just constantly overwhelmed by the job that's presented to him, and he can't see himself doing any other job than the job presented to him because that's the kind of person he is. He very much wants to be someone who stands up for people who haven't done anything wrong. This is an endearingly optimistic vision of attorney behavior. And it's really nice. It's really quite sweet that he actually cares about constantly representing innocent people, and the only outcome that's acceptable is they don't go to jail and they get to go home because they didn't do anything wrong. There are some corruptions to this formula, some little wiggles along the way, but broadly speaking, this is the core of what you're going to see. Phoenix Wright steps up, usually without enough preparation, with what he thinks is the answer, and then has to try and like dance his way through logical hoops and various critical positions in the courtroom scenes. Generally speaking, there's a lot of times where you will want to yell at Phoenix because you can see very basic ways to do the thing that he's trying to find a elaborate nonsense way to do. It's a very point-and-click puzzle in that regard, but in this case, it's kind of saved from the normal point-and-click use key on door kind of logic because Phoenix isn't allowed to volunteer certain things to the story because of the nature of it being a courtroom. The fact that there are weird rules stopping you from doing the obvious, simple thing is actually part of the point of the setting. Next up, you have his assistant through the first 3 games. Her name is Maya Fey. Now, this is immediately where this story of a visual novel about mysteries and solving puzzles ramps into space, because Maya Fey is a channeler who can commune with the spirits of the dead, which in a game full of murders, you might imagine would be super useful. Don't worry, it never is. The spirit mediums and the whole supernatural element of this story that gets introduced and used is always a detriment. I think at one point you managed to get a ghost to testify on the stand, but broadly speaking, they aren't allowed. But also, legally, the court has history recognizing the validity of this stuff and also has tried people for crimes committed while possessed by a ghost. So, don't ask for it to make sense. Maya Fey is also the source of one of the more glaring translation neologisms, where the character is so immensely Japanese. You can just look at her in her, the Magatama. She's wearing a whole bunch of Shinto paraphernalia. She's wearing a Japanese robe, and the story keeps on insisting in the English translation that, nope, we're in Chicago. Her favorite food is hamburgers. Eat your hamburgers, Apollo. Yeah, Maya is also, she's a load. Alright, I like her well enough, but broadly speaking, she is there to make cases more complicated and more difficult because she was there. She is your assistant, ostensibly, because her older sister was your mentor. The thing is, her older sister was Mia Fey, who's awesome, and also was a lawyer, whereas Maya Fey is a teenager. I guess it would be remiss to just act dismissively of Maya Fey. The actual stories that Maya opens up with the whole Kurine Village spirit channeling mediums kind of stuff, that's actually pretty interesting. It's also so patently nonsensical when it gets wedded to the very serious courtroom drama, people getting murdered kind of angle. There are some really good Hitchcock style, but who was phone kind of mystery stories that get told with a Kurine, where they say, well, I guess magic was involved, but you have to solve it and prove that magic wasn't involved. I like that, but then again, I'm a fan of card tricks, so I tend to like that kind of thing. Next up, you have Mia Fey. So we only get a little bit of a glimpse into Mia Fey's life in the story, because in the second case or so, I think it's the second case, she dies. This sucks. This really sucks. It's one of the many things about this series that makes me deeply unhappy, where you have this interesting, competent, badass woman character, and it's not just that she can't be there consistently. Like, they could have just written her out in some other way. They could have said her say, no, I'm going to Germany or something to go practice law there. No, they kill her, and they make her murder your first case, which means that, like, one of the opening images you have of this incredibly cool character who was definitely designed to be a beautiful woman, is her having been beaten to death. And that's a real downer, and also just kind of follows a trend that video games and murder mysteries tend to go in, where beautiful women exist to be victims. What's worse is that because they do flashbacks to Mia's life, and numerous times you'll actually go back in other games and play Mia, you find out she was great. She doesn't have the same kind of internal dialogue that Phoenix does, but she does have the same kind of ideology. That's really cool. So you get the same, I believe in my client, I believe in the truth, but instead of panicking and freaking out and having hilarious outbursts of weirdness. Mia is much more focused and narrow in the tutorial mission where you play Phoenix with Mia next to you. Mia is the one reassuring you and explaining to you what you need to do. In Mia's tutorial mission, when you play her boss is freaking out next to her, and she explains to him, no, don't worry, here is what I have to do. And so you get the same tutorial effect where the player has stuff explained to them, but you don't have the character basically pissing herself worried through the whole story. Then they do another one, which is her first case, which I'm not a fan. Anyway, continuing the Faye family, we have Pearl Faye. I think she's technically a cousin of Maya and Mia. The nature of this, there's a lot of translation weirdness in Phoenix Wright, because Phoenix Wright is the original series, Turnabout Lawyer, is a very Japanese series. It is, everyone can walk out the door and go find a Shinto shrine within a few minutes' walk. It has episodes about tokusatsu and episodes about classical circuses, and the lawyer dramas and whatnot are all just crammed right up against them in a way that works really obviously if you've ever seen or dealt with Japanese live-action TV. Like, this is not a particularly weird kind of setting, but when you play around in the translated English space, there's a lot more stuff that would normally be kept in very separate spaces. You might see a series like Matlock or Murder, She Wrote do one episode where they go to like a circus, but it wouldn't be like this protracted multi-stage thing where you're meant to get to know every person at the circus and know their particular quirks. And you'd get one weird thing. You wouldn't get a bag of weird things. So what that means in the case of the Faye family is, I'm pretty sure Pearl is Maya's cousin, but also it's entirely possible I'm remembering something from a translated version of this or a Japanese thing where the whole story has been kind of muddled around a little to make room for the fact that these characters don't really fit in, and the story keeps trying to wedge them in of like, oh yeah, we went on a 20-hour train ride to the other side of the country to find a place where there's one Shinto shrine. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff like that in the Phoenix Wright stories, where there's a whole bunch of what you can change in the text gets changed a lot, but what you can change in the graphics doesn't. Pearl is, however, a sweet bean of a character who gets muddled up in way too many murder mysteries. It's just not reasonable. This kid is introduced in a murder mystery where, you wind up having to get her, I think, to testify on stand about breaking a pot. No, you don't. You actually promise her you won't get her to testify on the stand, but you still have to rumble this kid at having broken a pot because it's important to the nature of a murder. And things don't get that much better for Pearl. Pearl's great, but also Pearl gets used in another really weird way, where, because she is also a spirit medium, she winds up channeling Mia, which means we get a picture of a sprite of Mia, a grown woman who is very much shaped like a grown woman, being channeled into the body of and outfit of Pearl, who is very small. So you get this kind of weird effect of, here is a child's outfit stretched out around a very voluptuous woman, and it's a little uncomfortable. Just a little uncomfortable. Anyway, next up, we have, moving on from the Wright and Associates grouping, we now move into the prosecutorial team that kind of defines the way prosecutors work in this universe. We are going to talk about Phoenix Wright's boyfriend, Myles Edgeworth. Don't worry, we're talking about his boyfriend, Dick Gumshoe, as well later. So in canon, there is absolutely nothing to justify the idea that these two characters are in any way in a romantic relationship. They are friends. That's the extent that the actual story puts it at. And the fact that they are friends who occasionally talk to each other about their feelings in our queerness-starved world means they look really gay, especially because of the way we treat men's relationships. But Myles is a prosecutor. Prosecutors in this setting have fantastically overwhelming levels of power in the court system. This is, as it turns out, somewhat truth in television. The Japanese court system puts a lot of power in the hand of prosecutors. They're allowed to do a lot. including, in this case, just gathering evidence on their own. Myles just, okay, in his own game, we see that Myles does just wander around crime scenes, stuffing evidence into his pockets, and he'll get back to it later if the police need it, which is kind of a dick move. Edgeworth is a very clear kind of foil character to Phoenix, where Phoenix is sunshiny and incompetent. Edgeworth is always cool, always calm, always reserved, and almost always has a trick up his sleeve because he's prepared well, because, I don't know, he did the readings. Phoenix. That said, Myles is full of all those things that tend to make a character like this appeal to an audience, in that he's also a colossal fuck-up. Despite being this golden boy, excellent super prosecutor, he's also extremely emotionally fraught. He takes his failures from Phoenix very personally. He views the fact that he almost he prosecuted people who, as it turns out, were probably innocent really badly. He quits being a prosecutor multiple times. And he's a good counterpoint to Phoenix, because while Phoenix is getting this sequential level of success, and Myles is also being very successful in his career, when they interact, it's very much someone you have to beat. And you have to be able to respect and enjoy that character, because you're going to spend a lot of time around him. And it's very easy to get that adversarial relationship in a fun kind of way. Myles is... he's a very serious boy. He's a very... for Christ's sake, look at the man. He's wearing a cravat. All right, this is a guy who takes himself very seriously. And when we get to see his inner dialogue, it's more or less the same, and he even remarks on how disdainful prosecutors treat him when he works as a defense attorney, which is a nice sign that it's not just that he's a dick, it's that the prosecutorial position just lets the prosecutor be a dick to the defense attorney, and they're not going to hold back just because Myles is, one of them. Next up, we have Dick Gumshoe. You might have noticed some of these names are a little kind of punny. Like, not actually particularly funny, but there's definitely some play going on here. Dick Gumshoe is a walking shrug in an overcoat. He is a very well-intentioned, very friendly, big puppy of a man who wants to be a good detective, and wants to act like a good detective, like he's seen them act on TV. And he wants to do right by people, but the people he mostly focuses on isn't the suspects, it's the prosecutor to whom he is beholden, which is usually Edgeworth. When Edgeworth isn't the focus, though, Dick is a little less inclined to help them, and even actually helps you out against one of the more awful prosecutors later in the games. Dick is fun. I shouldn't call him Dick. Like, everyone calls him Gumshoe. He's just a guy called Gumshoe. The first name is kind of a coincidence. He's kind of dumb. He's very easily fooled. You can outwit him. There are a lot of times that in the exploration segments of the game, Gumshoe is kind of your puzzle to get around, because he's getting in the way of you doing an investigation. And when you manage to move him on, it's like, ooh, I get to go back there and check this stuff out. He's also pretty consistently shown as having always been a good guy. Like, he's very enthusiastic and very positive. If he was better looking, he would be a himbo. Next up, we have the Judge. That's the only name we have for him. The Judge is awful. The Judge is a character who is mostly there to serve a game function, which is to say, he's there to give you the leading questions you need to answer to show that you've solved the puzzle. And also, this means that he is often asking you really stupid questions that you should be able to answer obviously. The Judge is incredibly bad at his job. He's quite dumb. He has a short attention span. He's easily bullied and coward. He lets prosecutors get away with everything, including attacking him. There are a couple of prosecutors who have physically struck the Judge, and he just has been okay with that. And he's such a cipher that at one point in the story, they show you the Judge's younger brother, who just behaves exactly the same way and has different hair. No, the Judge is... the interesting thing is, like, there's a whole bunch of concept art of the Judge where he's actually like this absolute unit of a man, but he's a complete pushover who doesn't really do anything interesting in those games. Not in the first three. He shows some spine later on after they've had, 15 years of work on this character. But now, while we're at it, let's talk for a little bit about prosecutors. I guess the next one we're going to bring up is Goddo. Now, this is a very spoilery one, and I don't want to go particularly in depth with Goddo. But what I will say is Goddo is a really great example of one of the types of character work this story does, where there is a degree to which they can reveal and explain things about a character that were somewhat obvious. Like, you can see an A point and a C point for a character the second you see them, but you have no idea how B happened. And the process of uncovering B is really interesting. There's also an element to which Goddo is designed so that his character design conveys with it information that becomes meaningful to the game. So that's really good. That's really great work. Goddo also gets to exist in kind of like this overlapping Venn diagram where there is this like interesting, complex character and traumatized soft boy, and then absolute unredeemable piece of shit. And I don't know exactly how to square all these circles. I don't like Goddo, but I really like the stories they were able to tell because they had Goddo. I guess one spoiler I'll give you is there's not a lot of him. He only shows up in one game. Next up, Francesca von Karma. Gotta be careful here. Gotta be careful particularly because she feels like the OC of a couple of my friends. Francesca von Karma is a hyper-competent young prodigy lawyer. She started practicing law when she was 13, and she started prosecuting internationally, which is like the Phoenix Wright universe's version of, proof of the super badass around the age of 15, I think. She's just preposterously smart, and she's meant to be just the best at what she's done, and she's had a perfect record, and that is a point that is used against you when you and her first interact, because at that point, Phoenix has a perfect record. So, who will win? How will this story come out? A prosecutor with a perfect record versus a defense attorney with a perfect record. What will happen? And that's really interesting. Yeah, she also projects a very, gay air. This is not necessarily because she is particularly sexual, per se, although here we hit another problem. What she does is she bosses people around, she hits them with a whip. She hits everyone with a whip. She refers to Gumshoe as her dog, alright? And the thing is, that's not inherently sexual. That's actually kind of just being a mean asshole to people. It's when it's being done in a consenting sexual environment that it suddenly looks like a particular kind of sexual behavior. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to open the door yourself, but once it's open, it's very much held there. So Francesca is introduced as this super prodigy. She's also an immense asshole. She's really awful to you. And she hits people, and she hits Gumshoe, who's just doing his job. It's like, very much sets you on edge. And the thing is, this happens so much that you kind of stop paying attention to it. The fact that she's whipping people with a whip is just kind of, yeah, I guess that's happening there. Yeah, hilariously, she just hit the judge in the face. She is a excellent character. I really like Francesca. But also, I recognize that there is a degree to which the phenomenon I refer to sometimes as girl hot does a lot for her, where if her behavior was being done by a dude, I would hate him. And the fact is, that's true, because later on, in another one of the games, they introduce a guy who behaves more or less the same way, and I want to drown him in custard. Continuing in the vein of prosecutors, we next up have Lana Skye. Now, Lana is another one of those characters who only shows up for one story. I don't want to give up too much in the way of spoilers. She's a defendant. She's someone that you have to wind up helping and protecting in her court case. And the main thing about her that I find interesting, and the thing I like about, why it's worth mentioning, is she was made for the Nintendo DS versions of this game. So she is a character made after they had the experience making all 3 of the other games, and also, I think, the first of the Apollo Justice games. So she's a reference to a character that shows up much later. And the case she's in is great, and it's got multiple layers to it, and it does a whole bunch of unique things with the interface, and it's all very cool, and it's extremely spoilery, so I don't want to actually go into it. The main thing is that Lana is a very beautifully stoic character. In this story, you're going to find a lot of characters who are standing on principle or making bad decisions because of their ideals, and Lana is a really good example of that. And the fact that no one around her who is her friend wants to try and countermand her in that regard shows that in addition to the actual villain's plan, which relies on this, she is respected by the people around her, and I think that's really cool. Now, prosecutors, I've shown you now some prosecutors who enable great stories, some prosecutors who are who become defendants, some prosecutors who are long-standing characters. Now we're going to do a prosecutor who's just a piece of shit. Manfred von Karma, and doesn't that picture make him look like a reliable legal professional? Oh my goodness, what a weirdo. So Manfred von Karma is the villain in the first game. I hope it's not a giveaway that you could look at this guy and go, well, that's a bad guy. His takedown is the entire arc of the first game. I don't want to go into how it happens or anything like that. Again, spoilers. But he is an excellent big ham villain, and it's kind of the thing that shows the way these games are going to play out from now on, where there's always going to be some sort of person at the end who reveals something about themselves who is just the worst. In his case, the revelation was, oh no, he is actually just the worst. He's Edgeworth's mentor, and that's pretty much the most I can give you without getting into spoilery stuff. Now, moving out of the direct prosecutorial group into the characters who are more kind of recurrent. Here we have Adrian Andrews. Now, she's shown up in a couple of games. She started out as a witness and kind of bounced around between various states of being accused of things and not being accused of things. Adrian's... she's a rough one, because on the one hand, she is a fairly well-realized and developed character, and I really like that. I find her very engaging, I guess, and I really want, I want her to have happy endings. I don't want bad things to happen to her, so I guess that the game has done a good job of making me care about this character's happiness. On the other hand, her whole thing is that she starts out as this super confident, very on-point, extra powerful, type A personality woman, and then it's revealed that, oh no, actually she's a hot mess, and it's all an act, and in fact, you have to make her have a breakdown on the stand to make it clear that, hey, look everyone, she's not the perfect super memory machine she pretends to be, and then after that, outside of the court case, you then kind of have to try and make amends, but you never really apologize for being a jerk to her, which... that sucks. That's a story tone I really could do without. The whole competent woman is revealed to be incompetent, and that's a big plot point, and she's, grateful for it and hangs out with you. The good news is that this particular dynamic, and her need for a mentor character means that she tends to actually, in-game, she does hang out with and spend time with Francesca. And that's pretty cool. That's actually a fun pair of characters having a hangout and doing a chat. Sadly, we don't see a lot of that, but it is explicitly stated. So, ship that. Shippers. Dear. Next up, we have Emma Skye. I am incredibly fond of Emma Skye, even though in these games she shows up once, and there she's kind of a useless kid. Well, sorry, not useless. She's actually super useful because she brings with her a whole raft load of goodies that let you have extra different mini games and solve puzzles. She's honestly quite great. I really love her. But she's only important in this game because they want to tie this game in its extra case, to Apollo Justice, which I've talked about in the past that I freaking love Apollo Justice. It's probably my favorite part of this whole franchise. Emma is, at the point you see her in these games, a bright-eyed, idealistic young woman who wants to become a crime scene investigator, and she's sunshiny and exploratory, and she believes in the power of science. She's great. This is one of those cases where I very much don't want to give anything away, because even if what's happening is or is not obvious, I do really appreciate the way that the story presents it. I think it's very much worth you going and checking that out on your own. Now, next up. Morgan Fay. Okay, so this character is recurrent technically in that she shows up multiple times. But she's awful, and I hate her, so we're moving on. Will Powers. Alright, Will Powers is... This is one of those ways in which you could say just how incredibly Japanese the Ace Attorney series is. Because he's effectively a tokusatsu actor. Well, actually, you know what? That might be a bit too of a imprecise term. What he is a guy who wears full costume and does stunt fights in The Steel Samurai. But the character is always in that outfit, so I don't know if it... Like, I imagine Toku fans are right now going, well, actually, that's not Toku because there's no transformation. But I don't know. I'm not sure. The point is that this guy wears a robot samurai outfit and fights ninjas on a TV show. He's a really good, lovable lunk of a character. First you have him as a defendant, but then you keep a relationship up with him and you see him at other events, and he actually helps out with a couple of cases later in the game, and in the really late game he does, in other games beyond these three, he does wind up doing other stuff as well. Will is a really interesting character. I like him a lot. Particularly one of the things about him is that he's kind of the starting point for the series, very recurrent theme of people not being what they seem, in that he's literally an actor who's playing a very well-loved popular role, but people who look at him think that he's a scary bastard and they don't like him and they're worried about him because he's so threatening. There's even a point about how he doesn't want to appear at the Steel Samurai events out of costume because he scares little kids. And this is a theme that you'll see used in almost every part of these stories. Like, characters very rarely are as simple as they look. And this means that when some characters are just like wilting violets that are useless, it really stands out. Lotta Hart. Okay. Okay, so Lotta Hart's a joke. Alright, she's a joke of a character. She was made to basically be someone with a camera at one scene. They reuse the sprite for another time. And this means that she's bounced around from job to job doing different photographer stuff, which means that she's shown up in a couple of cases. I personally find her really, really annoying. She's the kind of person, like, obviously she is a character invented and translated by someone, and the kind of character she is not necessarily reasonably representative of the culture she's meant to be extracted from. But she is the kind of person who talks defensively about other people looking down on the South, and how she knows how all you Yanks think. She's meant to have a Southern accent. She's meant to be Southern. She's got a weird kind of red afro, but she's very much a white person, so there's a lot of confused messaging there when you translate this character into the American version of the character, coupled with the fact that, broadly speaking, she is an inconvenience. She often has a camera work, some photograph or something that you need to solve the puzzle of the case, and she won't give it to you. Because capitalism. Now, there is one prosecutor who I did not mention in the prosecutor section, and that would be one Winston Payne. Winston Payne is your tutorial prosecutor. He is a comically incompetent, easily rattled dick. He's a joke. He's a joke about a gross-seeming Japanese businessman kind of character. He has related other characters who work in the same space. Like, he has a cousin, I think, or a brother. And one fun thing about him is you do find in flashback that Mia Fey met him on, I think, her second ever foray into the courtroom and beat him so perfectly it broke his soul. That's kind of the kind of character you're dealing with here. He's a joke. He shows up occasionally, usually at the start of the game. He's not very important, but he is the kind of... It is a nice beat that this thing has a consistent character for you to do as your punching bag opening court case for players who've never played this kind of game before. That's, kind of nice, I guess. Marvin Grossberg technically shows up multiple times. Mostly, he talks about his ass. Larry Butz, who is not an ass. Well, no, he is an ass. Larry Butz is Phoenix Wright's stupid best friend. Because what you really need in a visual novel is something that'll drive the plot along by doing something really stupid. Larry is a recurrent character who, across most of the games, is found doing something foolish that gets him in trouble. He very rarely is gainfully employed for any length of time. He is repeatedly tried for murder, and it turns out that every time he was not, in fact, the person who did the murder. Generally speaking, he is a comedic character. He's there to be a slightly crap version of everything he's trying to do, and you're meant to feel kind of pity for him. He's fine, all right? Like, I don't want to sit here and just run down this archetype that I don't like. He's just a bit of a boring, stupid friend who exasperates you a lot. Like, the more you play these games, the more you will get sick of hearing his theme, because it indicates that any progress you thought you were making is about to get made more complicated. Usually for a stupid reason. There's this bloke, Mike Meekins, who, Meekins shows up a couple of times. He's mostly just here to be a stand-in comedy prop. He's a funny, over-eager, over-enthusiastic, foolish kind of cop character. Generally speaking, whenever you see Mike Meekins, it's a sign that there's something about the character. Like, there's something that you're going to need to get out of this character that you can't get at first, even if it would be obviously helpful, because they're not going to think about volunteering useful information. It's like when you ask someone, do you have the time? And their response is, yes. And finally, in terms of recurrent characters in the Phoenix Wright saga, there's Wendy Oldbag. Now, it's possible while listening to this, you've gotten the vibe from me that there are some characters in this that I have very negative opinions of. There are people I just don't have any time for, and that's true. And broadly speaking, they go away or get their comeuppance. Villains get defeated. But apparently being an obnoxious, miserable old woman who impedes the lives of people around you and sexually harasses someone maybe a third of your age is just seen as good old fun. No, Wendy Oldbag is a security guard you meet in the first game, and she shows up repeatedly in a whole bunch of different officious positions where she can be an obstruction. Where Maya is a load, Wendy Oldbag is a pain. She will do everything she can to make the actual task of extracting information difficult, and she will usually need something in the form of a bribe. About the best thing about Wendy Oldbag is that if you check out Pros D on his podcast and Let's Play channel doing the Phoenix Wright voices, his voice for Wendy Oldbag is very, very funny. And that's that. I know it's not a long one. I know it's not a particularly thoughtful one. I know I mostly just walked through a wiki with you. But I hope this was some fun. This was specifically requested by one of my patrons. And I just want to say thank you. And if I've timed this one right, happy birthday and I love you.